You are listening to audiobooks at Feel Good Cultivation audio channel. Up next is Demon Emperor Episode Mo. Chapter Kong Nguyen Ho, after waking up, found himself perched on the eaves of the palace, beside a pool, in this prosperous capital, upon the magnificent imperial city built by the most skilled craftsmen in the world. He observed the most powerful imperial nobles and royal dukes in the mortal realm. He had truly transformed into a tiger. Unfortunately, it was a beast on the rooftop, essentially a statue on the palace. At night, storms raged. During the day, the sun blazed relentlessly. Why have I become this thing? The only consolation was that this palace held many novel things and sights he had never witnessed in his previous life. From up high, he watched the scenes within this imperial city, feeling as though he were watching a television drama. Yet it was far more real. On his first day here, the sky had not yet fully brightened. Bang bang bang, as a group of stooped court attendants passed through the corridors, striking instruments in their hands to create resounding noises. The entire imperial city immediately sprang into operation. The sun rose in the east, its golden light brilliant. The golden tiles of the imperial city shone even more brilliantly under the sunlight. And Nguyen Ho on the rooftop also felt a warmth. Nguyen Ho first observed the eunuchs passing through the corridors, the very ones he recognized as Taijian. These eunuchs were somewhat different from the effeminate and frail figures he had imagined. Many of them had beards, and quite a few possessed robust physiques, clearly capable of shouldering heavy burdens. Then he stared at the palace maids and female officials who, with heads bowed and maintaining decorum, hurried past. He observed their appearances, their attire and adornments, and also their lives. Finally, at noon, the eunuchs and palace maids decorated the garden by the pool, placing a couch in the pavilion and setting up a table opposite it. Then, he saw a group of people surrounding a figure approaching. It was the emperor. That person, dressed in a brocade robe embroidered with golden dragons, was the center of everyone's attention the moment he appeared. Everyone looked at him with awe and reverence. His every word and gesture could control them all. Even a mere glance from him would cause everyone to exhaust their minds trying to discern his thoughts, to curry favor and please him. Nguyen Ho was very curious about what kind of charisma he possessed. After carefully observing him for a long time, he saw that this was merely a young man, perhaps not yet 20, with nothing particularly special about him. But in the eyes of others, that person seemed like a deity. Inside the garden by the pool, the emperor sat upright on a sandalwood throne carved with intricate patterns. In the pavilion, looking down at musicians playing music, while on a platform, a lady in a floral dress sang verses. Surrounded by swirling incense smoke and melodious music, the emperor's eyes were dreamy, tapping to the rhythm, utterly engrossed. However, he did not notice that, high above, a non-human entity was staring intently at him. The second day, no one discovered that the stone statue originally on the eastern rooftop had, at some unknown time, moved to the west. It was moving, albeit very slowly, but in one night, it had crawled the distance of an entire palace building. People only paid attention to matters happening on the ground. Very few would notice changes high above. Or perhaps, no one ever imagined that the beast on the palace ridgeline could actually move. At this moment, Nguyen Ho was observing the scenery in the western palace. Beaded curtains swayed gently, casting the light, ethereal silhouettes of palace maids. They wore brocade robes, holding jade trays laden with exquisite delicacies from all corners of the world. Nguyen Ho, having eaten nothing, hadn't felt hungry, but at this very moment, he suddenly felt a pang of hunger. Quote, "I wonder what they taste like." The emperor casually extended his hand, and a concubine immediately placed a glistening, translucent grape into his mouth. Its sweetness made him narrow his eyes in pleasure. Nguyen Ho on the eaves also swallowed a non-existent mouthful of saliva. He too wanted a taste. The emperor nodded slightly, and the eunuch beside him immediately responded with a beaming smile. Then the eunuch looked towards the other side, his expression instantly turning cold, and clapped his hands lightly. Clap clap. Musicians began to play melodious tunes, and dancers swayed gracefully to the music. Their dance movements were elegant, like celestial fairies descended to the mortal world, captivating all who watched. The emperor watched, mesmerized, occasionally uttering words of praise. Meanwhile, the concubine beside him smiled like a blooming flower, seemingly immersed in the song and dance. Yet her eyes never strayed from the emperor. Yesterday, listening to verses; today, enjoying dances. The emperor's life was indeed rich and varied. The third day, the emperor, having just concluded the morning court session, proceeded to the garden. It had rained the previous night, and the air was fresh, invigorating the spirit. In the flower garden, rare and exotic flowers bloomed in vibrant colors, while rockeries with flowing water complemented each other's beauty. The emperor and his concubine strolled through it, admiring this picturesque scenery. However, today's concubine was not the same as yesterday's. Yesterday's lady, fair as the moon in the palace hall, her wrists as white as frost and snow. Today's beauty, whose adornments outshone the hibiscus flower, brought with her the scent of pearls and jade on the breeze from the waterside pavilion. One had skin whiter than snow and a proud figure. The other possessed a beauty that could topple cities and nations. Unfortunately, the emperor, walking in that garden, still felt dissatisfied. Though the palace scenery is beautiful, it's still a bit monotonous. I've heard the scenery of the Hap River is delightful. As the supreme ruler, I have yet to see it. The emperor always seemed filled with an air of grandeur and self-importance, possessing a confidence that ordinary people absolutely lacked. It was as if everything under heaven was within his grasp, even though this empire was not conquered by him, nor was his position as emperor earned through his own abilities. And even though by this generation, these 9 provinces and 4 seas were no longer entirely his, yet, he still possessed an inexplicably strong confidence. Its source unknown. The eunuch beside him, stooping and smiling, stepped forward and said loudly, "Everything under heaven is the king's land. The entire world belongs to your majesty. Your majesty naturally can go wherever you wish." But at this point, the eunuch changed his tone. "However, how can the outside world compare to the western capital? If your majesty wishes to see any scenery, you need only issue an edict. Just have it built in the capital city. Why bother going out? Whatever your majesty desires, your subjects will naturally offer it. There is no need for your majesty to fetch it yourself, needlessly demeaning your status." The emperor laughed heartily, finding these words very pleasant to hear. And so it went. Nguyen Ho watched him consume the most exquisite delicacies in the world, embrace the most beautiful women in the mortal realm, and act wantonly every day. It seemed this emperor did nothing at all, merely listening to verses and enjoying music daily. Yet he was lauded to the heavens by a cohort of officials and eunuchs, inflated into the greatest emperor of all time, while he, Nguyen Ho, could only remain on the rooftop, enduring storms and the harsh summer sun. Having become a demonic beast, Nguyen Ho's desires surged ever stronger. His demonic heart stirred. This emperor, I could take his throne. Nguyen Ho's heart was moved, the notion gradually deepening. The beast on the ridge line of the roof actually transformed into a black shadow, which then circled the eaves and descended. The 4th day. On that day, the emperor, hand in hand with his concubine, was boating on the lake, admiring the distant rockeries and pavilions. Night gradually fell. Dusk had arrived. Lanterns were already hung on the dragon boat. The black shadow, under the cover of darkness, gradually coalesced, taking human form, and suddenly appeared behind the emperor. Then, with one hand, it pushed the emperor into the lake. A demonic wind arose, swaying the trees on both banks and ruffling the turquoise water. The emperor, terrified, turned his head, and in the final moment before falling into the water, he finally saw clearly the form of the culprit. But what he saw was not human. It was a ferocious tiger with golden pupils, a demonic beast bearing sharp fangs. "Ah, His Majesty has fallen into the water. Quick, save him, save him, save him." On the boat, on the shore, everyone sprang into action. On the shore, Torches gathered like a long dragon from the boat. People continuously jumped into the water, finally managing to rescue the emperor. However, when that emperor opened his eyes from his stupor, his gaze was entirely different. They were a pair of sharp eyes, full of the disdainful arrogance of a demonic beast. Chapter Nguyen Ho lay in the emperor's bedchamber, his eyes closed, feigning sleep. At this very moment, upon him was a crimson blanket embroidered with golden dragons using gold thread. Around him were red silk curtains embroidered with clusters of golden grape-like patterns. And his nostrils caught waves of fragrance. It was like the scent of agarwood incense, yet mingled with other faint, delicate scents. Beside him, a concubine sat close, meticulously taking a handkerchief from a bronze basin held by a nearby palace maid and placing it on his forehead. Her beautiful eyes were gentle as water. Her red hairpin swayed gently, and her temple hair resembled wispy clouds. Even looking from this supine angle, not a single flaw could be seen on her face. Through the silk curtains embroidered with gold thread, layers of figures could be seen outside. Eunuchs stood in numerous rows along several layers of doorways, their heads bowed, not daring to breathe heavily. Outside the grand hall, guards in golden armor, holding long swords, stared intently at everyone. Several high-ranking ministers, dressed in purple robes with gold trim and wearing golden fish pouches at their waists, stood in the palace sighing, while whispering something to one another. An imperial physician stood by the dragon bed, feeling Nguyen Ho's pulse, gently shaking his head, looking exceedingly profound. This made Nguyen Ho a little uneasy, he thought to himself. Surely this man won't discover I'm feigning illness? Although he had fallen into the water, Nguyen Ho was not sick at all. He feigned illness and pretended to be asleep to observe the situation outside. Having just possessed this emperor's body, he could not act recklessly. The excuse of falling into the water also conveniently gave Nguyen Ho time to adapt. After the imperial physician finished taking the pulse, he packed up his instruments and wooden box and moved to one side. Immediately, the concubine, ministers, and eunuchs rushed forward at once, looking anxiously at the imperial physician. How is it? Is His Majesty all right? Is His Majesty's dragon body still in good health? The imperial physician respectfully bowed to each of them before speaking. His Majesty's dragon body is fine, he just caught a cold. He will recover after a few days of rest. This humble servant will prescribe some medicine. Just follow the prescription and take the medicine. Hearing this, the crowd finally breathed a sigh of relief. Then, the concubine took the prescription, handed it to a nearby eunuch, and the eunuch immediately made arrangements. No one noticed that the emperor on the dragon bed was cautiously peeking with one eye open, watching them through the silk curtain. Investigate. There must be a thorough investigation. How could His Majesty fall into the water for no reason? Someone must have maliciously harmed him. His Majesty still hasn't regained consciousness. Nguyen Ho could vaguely understand the arguments outside. It was a language similar to a southeastern dialect. But understanding this local dialect didn't mean Nguyen Ho could speak it. Nguyen Ho dared not open his mouth, fearing that as soon as he spoke, people would discover his abnormality. But pretending to sleep indefinitely wasn't a solution. Cough, cough. At this moment, Nguyen Ho suddenly coughed twice. In an instant, everyone was startled, and they all looked over. Your Majesty, Your Majesty. Beneath the silk curtain, Nguyen Ho waved his hand. Some were bewildered, but soon, someone quickly understood his intention. The concubine stepped forward, glanced at Nguyen Ho, and then said to those outside the curtain, Let's discuss this later. His Majesty needs to rest now. Whatever matter it is, wait for His Majesty to make his own decision. The ministers stepped forward to confirm that the emperor had indeed awakened and was showing improvement. Only then did they breathe a sigh of relief and take their leave one by one. Afterwards, the entire bedchamber became quiet again. However, things didn't seem as simple as Nguyen Ho had anticipated. Possessing this emperor's body had indeed been too easy, too simple. But how to prevent others from discovering the problem with this emperor later on was the most troublesome part. He didn't even know how to speak. It could be said that he hadn't even passed the first hurdle. What should I do? Nguyen Ho lay on the warm dragon bed, pondering this problem in his heart. If this dragged on, problems would arise sooner or later. Fei_GNM_Nay_Sia? Nguyen Ho thought to himself. But very quickly, several graceful and beautiful figures in palace attire appeared outside the curtain again. And the concubine once more drew close. Nguyen Ho first smelled that familiar fragrance, then felt the soft fabric of her palace gown touch his hand. Your Majesty, it's time for your medicine. The beautiful woman helped the still feigning illness Nguyen Ho sit up, letting him lean, weakly, against her, nestled in the concubine's embrace. This bowl of medicine seemed much less bitter. It had to be said. This dragon bed was much warmer than the rooftop. Not only was his body warm, but his heart was warm too. And just at this moment, outside the window, a shadowy figure seemed to flit past. Nguyen Ho immediately noticed it. He lay in the concubine's embrace, his gaze suddenly shifting slightly. His originally ordinary black eyes instantly turned golden, revealing an unsettling, demonic glint. And at this very moment, outside the window, it was pitch black. It was clear that it wasn't raining. Yet a line of wet footprints remained on the ground. What appeared to be footprints. Gradually, a figure appeared behind the window. It was a soaking wet silhouette, hair disheveled, exuding an overwhelming aura of resentment. Through the paper-covered window, one could vaguely discern a pair of blood-red eyes filled with venomous hatred. The sky was filled with dark clouds, and beyond the 9 layers of clouds, all the stars were hidden. The pond where the emperor had fallen. At midnight, a chilling wind blew past, causing the palace attendants and eunuchs passing by to feel a bone-chilling coldness. And they unconsciously carried their lanterns further away from this place. As the night grew deeper, a figure was seen slowly emerging from the depths of the pond. Walking towards the bank, it was definitely not the form of a human, but a ghost. Woo! 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 The ghost let out a mournful and tragic cry as it walked towards the depths of the palace. Occasionally, people passing by him would only feel their hair stand on end and a chill run down their spine. Brr, it's so cold. Why does this place feel so gloomy and cold? Let's go. Quickly, the ghost moved through the palace. But no one could see him. This ghost was none other than the emperor who had died tragically by falling into the pond. The ghost emperor, with disheveled hair, had died with his eyes open. He followed his senses, gradually making his way back to his own bedchamber, hoping to reclaim his body. But he immediately saw a sight that made his eyes almost pop out in fury. In the magnificent, gilded bedchamber, another, himself, was lying on the dragon bed, half on the dragon bed, and half nestled in the arms of his concubine. That demon had not only possessed his body, slept on his dragon bed, but also had his most beloved concubine by its side, serving it, while he, at this very moment, could only stand outside the window. Looking in, the ghost emperor instantly foamed at the mouth with rage. His eyes turned crimson red, revealing the true appearance of a vengeful spirit. He wanted to rush in, simultaneously letting out a choked scream. Woo! 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 Unfortunately, the concubine could not hear his screams at all. She only used her beautiful eyes to gaze wholeheartedly at the demon on the bed. The ghost emperor was so furious his eyes felt like they would burst. How could he not be driven mad? How could he not be filled with resentment? But just then, the demon seemed to have noticed him. The demon on the dragon bed slowly turned its head. Its eerie eyes glanced at him. And the ghost emperor instantly lost all his courage. All his anger was swallowed back down. His overwhelming resentment dissipated, and even his figure hunched over. He only dared to cower in the corner by the window, looking mournful and wretched, weeping pitifully as he peeked inside through a crack in the door. Kak Ban Dang Nghe Trian Demon Emperor Thai Feel Good Cultivation Audio Channel Chapter Hai Nguyen Ho naturally noticed the ghost outside the door. The disheveled, red-eyed vengeful ghost, looking somewhat terrifying, was loitering back and forth outside. He even heard it sobbing. clearly a manifestation of overwhelming resentment. Nguyen Ho was prepared to face the other's revenge head-on. On the contrary, this imperial throne, since he had seized it, it was his. If the other had the ability, they could try to take it back. It was just unexpected that, in the end, the vengeful ghost peeked through the door crack for a long time but still didn't enter. It seemed, the other had been furious for a while. But that was all it amounted to. All thunder and no rain. Why doesn't he come in? If it didn't come in soon, he would go to sleep. Nguyen Ho had thought there was something special about this bedchamber. He hadn't expected the ghost to be afraid of him. Nguyen Ho, attended by the emperor's concubine, finally finished drinking the medicine. The concubine placed the medicine bowl on the tray held by a nearby palace maid, then used a silk handkerchief to wipe his mouth. Only after helping him lie down did she stand up. Then, she placed a damp cloth on Nguyen Ho's forehead and gently asked, "Your Majesty, are you feeling any better?" Nguyen Ho nodded slightly, but his eyes kept looking outside. Suddenly, he pulled the concubine's hand, intending to ask if she sensed any commotion outside. However, the concubine seemed to misunderstand his intention. The beauty shyly leaned down, her body almost pressing against Nguyen Ho's side, and whispered in his ear, quote, "Your Majesty, the imperial physician advised that you need to rest and recuperate for these few days." This time, the vengeful ghost outside, seeing this scene, sobbed even louder. It was unclear what it was wailing about. Nguyen Ho glanced at the concubine, thinking to himself, "She can't even hear this?" A blush appeared on the concubine's face, seeing Nguyen Ho's hungry tiger-like gaze. She dared not respond. At this very moment, Nguyen Ho was thinking about the vengeful ghost outside. The vengeful ghost outside was thinking about the adulterous couple inside, and the concubine was lost in her own myriad thoughts. 3 individuals. One on the bed, one beside the bed, one outside the chamber, though in the same space. Their thoughts were worlds apart. An incredibly strange situation. Finally, Nguyen Ho thought that if he were to speak, the other party would surely discern something. He coughed dryly twice, then waved his sleeve. The concubine understood his meaning and stepped back 2 paces. "Then I shall not disturb your Majesty's rest. I bid my leave." The concubine led a retinue out of the bedchamber, followed not only by palace maids but also by several eunuchs carrying palace lanterns. When the door opened, Nguyen Ho glanced at the ghost emperor outside and noticed that the others still paid him no mind. With the door no longer obstructing his view, he saw more clearly, it was indeed a vengeful ghost. So, that emperor hadn't truly perished? And had even become a ghost? This was truly a major nuisance, if not dealt with. It could be considered an endless underlying disaster. Just as Nguyen Ho was pondering how to deal with it, a tiger's roar suddenly echoed from within his body. Roar. Nguyen Ho's vision blurred. An invisible fierce tiger emerged from his body and rushed out. The tiger's shadow leapt onto the high hall, passed through the roof, and vanished. And at this very moment, the vengeful ghost outside the door had also disappeared at some unknown point. Eunuchs carrying palace lanterns led the way, followed by palace maids. The concubine who had just attended to Nguyen Ho in the chamber led her retinue through shortcuts and numerous gates, finally arriving at a small courtyard. People were already waiting in the courtyard and immediately opened the courtyard gate and the inner door to welcome them. Having just sat down, the concubine, who had been gentle before the emperor moments ago, now had eyes filled with a sinister aura. Though still captivatingly beautiful, she no longer exuded a sense of warmth or intimacy. If that wretched servant surnamed Su hadn't instigated it today, why would His Majesty have gone boating on the lake? The emperor falling into the water was definitely her doing. I will never forgive her. The palace maid beside her spoke up. But while speaking, she didn't look at the concubine. Her hands were placed below her chest, and her eyes looked at the ground. With such a major incident, she certainly gained nothing. Moreover, because of this, His Majesty had a change of heart and realized the noble consort's virtues. Today, the one who stayed by His Majesty's side was still the noble consort. It seems that at the crucial moment, The person His Majesty values most is still the noble consort. Hearing this, a smile finally appeared on the concubine's face. And then she said nothing more. After a period of busyness, it was now past midnight. Time to rest. The lights in the rooms were extinguished one by one. And gradually, the sounds of conversation and footsteps faded away. However, this tranquility did not last long before the sound of footsteps echoed from afar. Not only that, but the footsteps were unlike normal ones, accompanied by a squelching sound, as if treading on water. Sob, sob, sob. As the footsteps drew nearer, they were accompanied by mournful, soft sobs and the dripping sound of water. That ghost, not daring to confront the ferocious demon, had followed the concubine's trail all the way here. Wretched woman, all deserved to die, deserved to die. The ghost emperor, staggering and dazed, finally found the right place. He seeped through the tightly shut door like a stream of water, passed through courtyards and pavilions, and entered within. Here, not here. Where? The vengeful ghost, filled with resentment, searched from door to door, pausing before window after window. Peering inside, the disheveled, soaking wet ghostly figure passed through courtyards, through doors and windows, and finally found the correct location. Quote, found it. Before a window, the vengeful ghost stared inside with its bloodshot eyes. However, just as the vengeful ghost was about to enter, a sound suddenly came from the rooftop. As if something had arrived, the vengeful ghost looked up and saw a demonic tiger peeking its enormous head from the eaves, glaring fiercely at him. Roar! That demon opened its blood basin-like mouth and swallowed. But at the same time, the concubine sleeping inside also screamed and jolted upright. Awakening from a nightmare, she immediately woke the two palace maids sleeping in the outer room. They quickly entered and saw the concubine with sweat drenching her forehead. Noble consort, what's wrong? Were you having sleep paralysis? The concubine, terrified, looked towards the window and kept backing away. At this point, a palace maid stepped forward, opened the window, and looked out. However, there was nothing outside. Only then did the concubine calm down, wiping the damp sweat from her temples. It's nothing, just a nightmare. Palace maid. Then did you dream of any evil creature? Concubine. I dreamt of a malevolent ghost standing before the window, about to harm me, when suddenly a white light descended from the sky, and the ghost vanished. Knock, knock, knock. At this moment, the sound of knocking suddenly came from afar. A line of figures passed through shortcuts and under palace corridors, striking wooden fish. The horizon also gradually brightened with it. Golden sunbeams shone upon the imperial city, and all darkness began to recede and then dissipate. The bedchamber. Nguyen Ho suddenly opened his eyes and saw the shadow of a fierce tiger returning and entering his body. Just before entering his body, the fierce tiger spat out a mass of light, which merged into Nguyen Ho's eyes. In an instant, Nguyen Ho knew what that mass of light was. Soul-snatching. Those he killed would all turn into ghosts after death. The tiger would devour them at night. Their power would be refined by the tiger. And then the tiger would spit out their souls, which would become Nguyen Ho's power. The Zhong soul of refined speech. Nguyen Ho sensed a power of the Zhong soul within it and immediately found countless memories related to language continuously merging into his consciousness. The so-called refined speech referred to the common tongue. By absorbing this Zhong soul of refined speech, Nguyen Ho finally learned the local language here. Not only that, because this language skill included not just the language itself, but also many linguistic application techniques, related knowledge, and some supplementary memories. Chapter Ba. After learning to speak the refined courtly tongue, Nguyen Ho's illness swiftly made a full recovery. Inside the ancient, elegant hall, brilliant yellow tasseled curtains hung, and a screen obscured the view. Nguyen Ho sat behind the crimson lacquered, gold-inlaid imperial desk piled high with official documents. Under the light of a bronze lamp adorned with sunflower patterns, his shadow stretched long and undulating like a mountain range. The Da Sheng dynasty. After all, having been here for several days, He still wasn't clear on what this place was ultimately called or what the situation outside was like. But upon closer examination, Nguyen Ho discovered something was amiss. His status as the son of heaven, it seemed, wasn't quite legitimate. The previous occupant was also named Nguyen Ho, just with a different character for Ho. It sounded as if Nguyen Ho had arrived in a parallel world, usurping the destiny of another version of himself. His dynasty was called Da Shang, said to have been established 200 or 300 years ago. But the true Da Shang had actually perished decades prior. Later, the late emperor, who carried the bloodline of a collateral branch of the imperial family, was supported by the great clans of the western city region. He ascended the throne and proclaimed himself emperor in the western city, restoring the Da Shang dynasty. But he could only hold onto the western city for self-preservation, lacking any ambition for advancement. Nevertheless, he still proclaimed himself the legitimate ruler of the 9 provinces, the common lord of all under heaven. He even borrowed false authority to issue orders to the outside world, then closed his doors to indulge in his own delusions. Nguyen Ho raised an eyebrow. Previously, hearing the eunuchs and civil and military officials address him as Your Majesty, claiming that all land under heaven belonged to the king, all people were his subjects, praising his virtues day after day, dancing and singing his praises, saying that their dynasty was like the midday sun. He had truly believed this was the son of heaven of a powerful dynasty. Now it seemed, let alone being like the midday sun, he was barely even a late dynasty emperor. An attendant eunuch was bringing freshly brewed Junshan silver needle tea, about to change the old cup, when a voice echoed from outside. Your Majesty, pillar of the state, Great General Bui Nguyen Kiu requests an audience. As soon as the words fell, the person had already strode in. Golden armor glinted coldly in the evening shadows. Bui Nguyen Kiu, wearing his sword, entered the hall, proceeding directly into the inner palace. Nguyen Ho looked up, beyond the screen. A tall, sturdy figure was vaguely discernible. Even though Nguyen Ho didn't understand much about etiquette, he could still discern the blatant insolence in this act. Your subject, Bui Nguyen Kiu, respectfully inquires after your Majesty's well-being. The voice was like metal striking the ground. No matter how arrogant and insolent the other party seemed, when facing this emperor, he ultimately had to kneel and perform the obeisance. Quote, I had just returned to the capital when I heard your Majesty was in peril. My heart burned with anxiety, so I rushed here overnight. Although Bui Nguyen Kiu knelt on the ground, he still held no regard for the Son of Heaven above him, because this emperor was one he himself had installed. Without him, the other man could not have become emperor. However, Bui Nguyen Kiu had perhaps forgotten that while the other man needed his support to become emperor. Once he was emperor, the situation had changed somewhat. But at this very moment, he only clearly remembered how, a few months ago during that great turmoil, when he led his troops to escort the other man to the imperial throne, the man's hands had trembled ridiculously. Faced with the chaotic situation, the other man was like a quail shivering in the cold rain. An image that earned Bui Nguyen Kiu's contempt. Minister Bui, you may rise. From behind the screen, the voice, unhurried, emerged. Nguyen Ho assessed the figure beyond the screen, wanting to get a better look at him. At the same time, he also wanted the other to get a better look at him. Remove the screen. Let me have a good look at my pillar minister, the bedrock of my Da Shang, and let him see if I, the emperor, am worth anything. Perhaps because they were both tigers and wolves, Nguyen Ho saw very clearly the wolfish ambitions of this minister. The weaker you appeared, the more he would try to control you. Moreover, with his fierce tiger-like nature, asking him to feign subservience was impossible. He would rather face a swift blade from the start. The eunuch beside him waved a hand, and 2 other eunuchs stepped forward. The screen was slowly drawn aside. Nguyen Ho took a step out from behind the imperial desk. Bui Nguyen Kiu, being a military general, used that as an excuse to feign ignorance of etiquette. As for Nguyen Ho, he genuinely understood no etiquette whatsoever. He walked out directly from behind, sat down on the steps right in front of Nguyen Ho, and calmly looked down at the general in golden armor kneeling on the ground. Feeling the shadow fall upon him from above, Nguyen Ho also slowly raised his head. In that instant, Nguyen Ho felt as if sharp gazes were piercing him, as if he saw a pair of terrifying eyes staring at him. And an earth-shattering roar echoed in his ears. He couldn't tell if it was a dragon's roar or a tiger's roar. Nguyen Ho looked at the Son of Heaven seated on the steps. And for a moment, his pupils contracted violently. At this moment, he seemed to see a ferocious beast sitting in the foremost position, staring intently at him. Nguyen Ho felt that the Son of Heaven today was not the same person he had seen a few months ago. The other man wasn't afraid of him. No, that wasn't right. It wasn't that he wasn't afraid of him. It was more like a tiger or leopard staring intently at its prey. Those eyes didn't avoid his gaze but looked directly at him, asking him loudly, yet with a hint of a smile, "Well, this Son of Heaven, how much imposing aura do I possess?" This time, it was Nguyen Ho who dared not look directly into the Son of Heaven's eyes. He immediately lowered his head, kowtowed once more in obeisance, his voice becoming respectful. "Your Majesty's heavenly might is inviolable. Your humble servant dares not look directly at the imperial countenance." In the end, this audience with the Son of Heaven concluded perfunctorily. Nguyen Ho's original strategy, to threaten the Son of Heaven to increase the troops under his command and further extend his influence into the capital, had not even been implemented. Nguyen Ho left the imperial city, stood on the imperial way, and looked back towards the inner palace. He frowned. His expression carried several degrees of astonishment and doubt. At this time, his adjutant leading the horse beside him also noticed. "My lord, did something happen? Why do you look so troubled?" The more Nguyen Ho looked into the depths of the imperial city, the more he felt a tremor in the pit of his stomach. Though he didn't know where this fear originated. Immediately after, he became somewhat wary of the entire capital city. "I have led troops to campaign in all directions, and never have I feared under a hail of arrows and blades. Yet, meeting the Son of Heaven again after these few months, his aura is like that of a dragon or tiger, his majesty like heavenly power, making one dare not look directly. When he looked at me, it was as if he could see through my thoughts." Nguyen Ho, aghast, couldn't help but sigh. Could it be that the mandate of heaven truly exists in this world? That the so-called Son of Heaven is indeed secretly protected by the heavens? Nguyen Ho looked up at the sky, feeling as if a pair of eyes were looking down at him from above. This Son of Heaven, I cannot meet him again. Nguyen Ho did not know, nor could he see, a tiger-shaped demon, transformed into a terrifying shadowy form, merged with the destiny of the Da Sheng dynasty, was intently observing the entire capital city from high above. If someone could pierce through the layers of metallic mist and see that demon open its blood basin mouth, with a terrifying appearance as if it wanted to swallow the entire world, they would probably faint from fright in an instant. People said Nguyen Ho had a rebellious streak, a wolfish ambition, but compared to Nguyen Ho, an otherworldly demon descended to the mortal realm, a fiend incarnate, Nguyen Ho was merely a novice encountering a master sorcerer. Quote, "This western capital also feels wrong. Not like before. I fear there has been some upheaval. Could someone be plotting against me? This is not a place to stay for long. Let us return quickly." Only a few months had passed. Yet the capital city gave him the feeling that earth-shattering changes had occurred. Only by returning to his army and his fiefdom could he feel a sense of security. Nguyen Ho left the western capital, filled with astonishment and doubt. But how could he know? This trip of his had also completely cost him the chance to stop Nguyen Ho. And at this very moment, eyes pierced through layers upon layers of palace buildings, to a deep recess within a certain palace. In a vision only Nguyen Ho could see, that tiger once again emerged from his body, seeming extremely excited. Roar! The tiger circled around him, paced within the hall, appearing to reveal an irrepressible hunger. Nguyen Ho looked at the tiger. seemingly knowing what it wanted to do. Quote, "You tell me, if you were to devour that Bui Nguyen Kiu's soul, would it bring me something even better?" That tiger could not speak. Nor did it seem to possess true consciousness. Or perhaps, it was an external manifestation of Nguyen Ho himself. The desire to devour that it displayed was also Nguyen Ho's own intention. At this moment, it nestled obediently at Nguyen Ho's feet, a pair of identical demonic pupils glowing, staring fixedly outwards, its blood basin mouth agape. As if it was saying something. Yes, 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 I know. Nguyen Ho nodded slightly. Although this son of heaven was not the true son of heaven, and his position was not very stable. But this situation of brewing storms and widespread chaos in the world seemed to make Nguyen Ho feel even more adapted. It was as if some evil demon in his heart was roaring, beating drums and cheering, "Chaos, chaos, kill, 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 kill," until Nguyen Ho retracted that tiger into himself. Kak Ban Dang Nghe Trian Demon Emperor Thai Feel Good Cultivation Audio Channel Chapter Bon Nguyen Ho felt that something was not quite right. Rumors about ghosts and demons in the palace. No one knew who started them, but they gradually began to spread. The successive incidents in the palace led many people, both inside and outside the court, to believe that it was due to the mischief of ghosts and gods, or that someone was using talismans and curses to harm the emperor or the imperial court. Originally, the palace housed a group of Vu Hitch, known as the Vu Hitch of the Hell Dao, and they swore even more firmly that this was the case. When they spoke of this matter before Nguyen Ho, they even put on an act, describing the enraged appearance of those ghosts and gods. Everything between heaven and earth is governed by ghosts and gods. If the ghosts and gods are enraged, they can bring disaster upon humans. Initially, Nguyen Ho didn't pay much attention. After all, they were just a group of Vu Hitch feigning divinity and conjuring spirits. And they seemed to be merely putting on an act. Then he discovered, throughout the court, both inside and outside the palace, it seemed there were still quite a few followers of the Vu Hitch. They also clamorously submitted memorials to the emperor, suggesting that the Vu Hitch should be invited to exorcise demons and evil spirits. Therefore, a grand ritual to worship ghosts and gods was held in the palace. That day, as soon as it grew dark, a lavish ceremony began in the square in front of the Zi-Chen Hall. Clang clang clang. Palace maids and eunuchs flung open all the windows inside and outside the hall and secured them. Then hung up palace lanterns one by one. After Nguyen Ho, escorted by the honor guard, arrived and was seated in the palace, everyone gradually took their positions, and orderliness prevailed both inside and outside the palace hall. A eunuch quickly stepped out and then shouted loudly to the group of Vu Hitch, "Invite the Ghost Master to perform the rites." The so-called Ghost Master was the imperial court's term in the western part of the city for a Vu Hitch. Ordinary Vu Hitch did not hold this title. It was considered a type of official position. Furthermore, they possessed magical powers to communicate with spirits, meaning they could supposedly invite deities to possess their bodies. Male shamans were called Ling Bao, and female shamans were called Mo Ao. These were merely the terms used in the region around Shijian. Other places had an even wider variety of names, such as Su Ba, Thay Ga, Thay Nge, Thay Rua, Shaman, Exa Chu, and so on. Hearing the name, Vu Hitch, might suggest they were all of the same kind. But in reality, the differences among them were vast. Among the many factions, their scripts, customs, and beliefs were worlds apart, and there was certainly no common origin or lineage. It was said that the previous emperor had a fondness for sorcery, often summoning these Vu Hitch to consult with them, and even held rituals to worship ghosts and gods multiple times. But for Nguyen Ho, this was the first time he had witnessed such a thing. However, the scene looked a bit strange. Nguyen Ho, considered the greatest demon of them all, was sitting calmly behind the curtain in the hall, issuing orders for the Vu Hitch outside the hall to exorcise demons. Ooh! Following a strange cry, the Ghost Master, wearing a long-horned demon mask, suddenly plunged a bronze axe into the altar, shattering a turtle shell on it. On the altar, Vu Hitch wearing masks of the 12 divine beasts knelt on the ground. Below the platform, over 100 young attendants wearing red scarves shouted in unison, their roars like a tidal wave washing over the Kai Wen ornaments on the 9-tiered palace eaves. Then they began to run in circles around the altar in the spacious courtyard. The torches held high in their hands transformed into writhing fire dragons, the firelight reflecting on the peach wood figurines hanging under the eaves, making them glint with a blood-red hue. Inside the main hall, although the night wind blew relentlessly from all directions, Nguyen Ho watched with rapt attention and interest. As the ritual gradually reached its climax, the Ghost Master began to shout loudly, "Offer up my grains." Immediately, groups of young attendants came forward, pouring grains into the vessels on the altar until they were full. Then, the Ghost Master shouted again, "And my live goat." Although Nguyen Ho had never seen it before, he knew this was the process of offering grains and livestock as sacrifices. However, Nguyen Ho did not see anyone bring up a live goat. The Ghost Master waved his hand, and the bronze lamp shaped like a Zan Nio bird on the altar suddenly lit up, its flame shooting up high. Below the altar, the red-scarfed young attendants held their torches high, under the blazing firelight. From beneath the Zan Nio bronze lamp, a young maiden gradually ascended the platform, her 7-layered ceremonial robe adorned with jade, cascading down like clouds. The young maiden dipped her fingertip in rooster blood and swiftly wrote on a piece of yellow silk, each brushstroke forming thunderbolt-shaped seals. Dong 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 dong. At midnight, the sound of the watch drum pierced through the dense fog. The Vu Hitch wearing the masks of the 12 divine beasts on the altar suddenly turned to face the 8 directions of the altar, each standing erect, waving star-patterned banners adorned with pheasant feathers, the sounds of bronze bells and bone flutes intertwining. The Ghost Master suddenly removed his mask, revealing a face like dried tree bark. Then, he drew a knife and slit the young maiden's throat, the Ghost Master's demeanor as if he were slaughtering a chicken. The young maiden seemed to have been raised for this since childhood. While being killed, she did not struggle at all, obediently sat on the ground, assumed a prostrate posture, and clasped her hands together in the shape of a lotus flower. Offering them up, her appearance suggested she was wholeheartedly offering herself to the so-called ghosts and gods. In the hall, Nguyen Ho, who had initially regarded this merely as a ritual, was stunned for a moment, his brows furrowing tightly. He suddenly understood. The phrase, "and my live goat," and livestock, had such a meaning. The eunuch standing to one side heard Nguyen Ho speak and immediately stepped forward, saying, "Your Majesty, the gods accept human lives. They will naturally bless your Majesty and protect our great Sheng for thousands upon thousands of years." Nguyen Ho glanced sideways at this eunuch, the corner of his mouth curling into a sneer. Just by looking at the other's demeanor, he knew the previous emperor must have performed this kind of ritual more than once or twice. Nguyen Ho raised his hand, and the eunuch immediately approached. Nguyen Ho opened his mouth and said, "Bring that Ghost Master here." The eunuch glanced outside for a moment. "Your Majesty, it won't be over for a while yet?" A cold glint suddenly flashed in Nguyen Ho's eyes. The eunuch was terrified and immediately said, "This old servant will go invite him at once." Very quickly, the Ghost Master arrived before Nguyen Ho. Through the thin silk curtain, Nguyen Ho's voice was calm. He asked, "I've heard the Ghost Master is proficient in the art of physiognomy. How about you read my fortune today?" The Ghost Master felt it was a bit strange. After all, he had met the Emperor quite a few times and had also read the Emperor's fortune before. At this moment, why would the Emperor ask him to read his fortune? But the Ghost Master didn't ask much, only obeyed the decree and stepped forward, his voice hoarse as he said, "This old man obeys the decree." However, when the curtain was lifted, the moment the Ghost Master saw Nguyen Ho, his pupils instantly dilated to their fullest. The Ghost Master stood stunned on the spot, his mouth agape, broken sounds of fear escaping his throat. "Ah, ngh. This time, Nguyen Ho did not release the tiger spirit within his body. But this grand sorcerer, who served as the ghost master in the palace, seemed to truly possess some extraordinary ability. For he had genuinely discerned something from Nguyen Ho's appearance. However, before he could utter his next words, Nguyen Ho suddenly drew the emperor's sword from his waist. The sword tip, like an azure wave gliding across a lake, swiftly and gracefully slit the ghost master's throat. Fresh blood also rippled like waves, splattering onto the red cloth curtain embroidered with grape patterns. Gurgle, gurgle. The ghost master did not clutch his throat. Instead, he still used all his strength to point at Nguyen Ho with a look of terror. As he was about to die, he seemed to still want to say something. It was perhaps an earth-shattering secret. Unfortunately, as he knelt, then collapsed to the ground, unable to rise, he could not reveal that secret. Ah! At this moment, someone in the hall cried out in fear. But when Nguyen Ho, flicking his dragon robe, stood up and his gaze swept across the main hall, everyone immediately fell silent and bowed their heads, not daring to utter a single word. At this moment, those outside the hall still did not know what had transpired within. Nguyen Ho advanced step by step, stepping over the corpse beside him, and walked out from behind the curtain. The eunuch watched the emperor's retreating figure. This time, he truly felt that the emperor seemed somewhat different. Nguyen Ho wiped his sword, then looked at the 12 Vu Hitch wearing divine beast masks on the altar, and said nonchalantly, "Those ones up there, kill them all." As soon as these words were spoken, the eunuch beside him became flustered. "Your Majesty, they cannot be killed. These ghost shamans of the Hell Dao, they worship the great emperor of Fengdu himself. They absolutely cannot be killed." Hearing this, it seemed that there was a powerful force behind these shamans. But Nguyen Ho noticed that after he gave the order, many of the surrounding guards remained motionless, their eyes filled with astonishment, doubt, and indecision. Nguyen Ho's thoughtful gaze swept over each person one by one. At this moment, a captain in the hall suddenly acted. He shouted loudly, "Kill!" As soon as that person moved, 20 or 30 men immediately followed him, rushing out. Eventually, everyone obeyed the order. Then the guards rushed out of the hall and killed the 12 Vu Hitch wearing divine beast masks on the altar. Before these ritual participants could even react, among them, 2 panicked and fled. These 2 Vu Hitch seemed to possess some means, running as fast as hunting leopards. The captain, lacking a bow and arrow, seized a long spear and hurled it, directly transfixing one of them. The remaining 100+ young attendants were also apprehended by the armored guards, awaiting disposal. In just a moment, the captain, covered in blood, entered the hall and knelt before Nguyen Ho. Nguyen Ho was not afraid of the other's fierce appearance or his body drenched in fresh blood. He reached out, placed his hand on the other's shoulder armor, and could feel the thick, viscous blood in his palm. He asked, "What is your name?" The captain, holding a blood-stained saber, knelt on the ground and, with an agitated spirit, said to Nguyen Ho, "Your Majesty, your humble servant is Yuchi Chongwu, currently serving as a captain in the hall." Nguyen Ho looked at the first person to obey his decree, the one who had directly taken action against the Vu Hitch of the Hell Dao. Quote, "I promote you to Captain General of the palace. Henceforth, you shall attend by my side." Then, Nguyen Ho looked towards the few lieutenants and another captain who had hesitated earlier after hearing his decree, and also the eunuch who had always been attending him, whose name Nguyen Ho still did not know. He smiled, but no one in the main hall saw him smile. They only felt as if they were seeing a vicious dragon or a fierce tiger baring its fangs. In an instant, sweat poured down these people's foreheads like rain, drenching the hems of their robes. That eunuch was so terrified he lost control of his bladder, all strength draining from him as he collapsed limply to the ground, as if dead. When a person could kill with just a look, when a single sentence could make the world flow with rivers of blood. Even though he possessed a human form, in everyone's eyes, he seemed to be imbued with a certain non-human image. Late at night, Nguyen Ho lay on his bed. The tiger within his body seemed to smell something and began to grow restless. In just a moment, the tiger went out again. It passed through the rafters, leapt onto the rooftop, and disappeared into the night. When the tiger returned, Nguyen Ho opened his eyes and found he had learned a fragment of the Ghost Master's memories. Or more accurately, an ability. Jung Po, Shang Ren. Chapter Nam, Your Majesty. It is the hour of the rabbit, you should leave your bed and wash up. There is a morning court session today. 2 palace maids used curtain hooks to draw up the bed curtains. About 20 to 30 eunuchs approached the front of the dragon bed. They stopped at a distance to perform their salutations, then called out softly. Nguyen Ho awoke, to harm the Son of Heaven, to sleep in the dragon bed. A single word from him held the power of life and death, capable of making blood flow like a river within the palace. It was all real, not a dream. Nguyen Ho was attended by a group of servants who dressed him, washed his face, and placed his hat. Throughout the entire process, Nguyen Ho spoke fewer than 10 words, most of which were single syllables. Afterward, for the first time, he rode in a sedan chair, traversing nearly half of the imperial city to attend court. As he sat in the magnificent, resplendent golden hall, he felt like a lofty deity, observing the mortals below. But if viewed from below, he resembled a statue displayed on high. A eunuch standing nearby announced the start of the court session, and the officials, one by one, stepped forward to report their matters. The incident that occurred in the palace last night had spread outside by today. The Vu Hitch Ghost Master was the mastermind who used dark arts to harm the Son of Heaven, the culprit who caused the Son of Heaven to fall into the water. Seeing that the Son of Heaven had not died, he then went further and brought malevolent spirits into the palace. Having failed, he then sought to assassinate the Son of Heaven during the grand exorcism ceremony. Therefore, as soon as the morning court session began, these individuals started attacking each other. Among them, the Prime Minister who had previously recommended the Ghost Master of the Hell Dao sect found himself besieged by accusations. This man was of imperial lineage, in terms of seniority. He was the uncle of this body Nguyen Ho inhabited. The pillar of state, Grand General, was so wary of the western capital and dared not stay long. Partly because of this man. It seemed, then, that this man, no matter what, could truly be considered a pillar of the state. Hearing this, one might have mistaken him for a character like the 8th virtuous prince. When evildoers cause chaos, there must be conspirators within the court colluding with external forces. That fiend dared to harm the Son of Heaven. He certainly wasn't the mastermind. The true mastermind is someone else entirely. It is said that fiend knew the Prime Minister. I wonder what the Prime Minister has to say. The pillar of state, Grand General, had just left the capital when that fiend immediately made his move. If this isn't related to the Prime Minister, who would believe it? The capital cannot be without pay. The pillar of state, Nguyen Ho sat on high, feeling as if he had become the king of Qin, watching the people in the hall perform a play revealing the truth. It was just that this blade, while ostensibly aimed at the Prime Minister, was covertly pointed at himself. Witnessing the fierce attacks between factions in court, the faction of the pillar of state, Grand General, and the Prime Minister's faction clashed tumultuously. The faction of the pillar of state, Grand General, suddenly gained the upper hand. The virtuous prince, Prime Minister now looked as if he were caught off guard, utterly defenseless. In addition, some representatives from prominent clans and families from various places also stepped forward to add fuel to the fire, seemingly afraid the situation wasn't volatile enough. And at this very moment, Nguyen Ho activated the art of person reading. Everyone said this Prime Minister was virtuous and good. He wanted to see if it was true. It had to be said. That Ghost Master, being a Grand Vu Hitch, should have possessed some abilities. Everyone said the Ghost Master possessed the magical art of physiognomy, but they didn't know that what he truly mastered was the art of person reading. Nguyen Ho had experienced it a little last night. This art of person reading was not simple. It held a certain mystique. If Nguyen Ho hadn't suddenly struck, that Ghost Master probably wouldn't have died so easily. Nguyen Ho's gaze turned towards the Prime Minister in the hall, instantly locking onto him. Then, from some deep, unknown place, something seemed to stuff streams of simple yet vague information into his mind. Nguyen Ho's brain automatically organized this information, which could be roughly categorized as facial aspect. This man has hawk eyes and the look of a wolf. He is definitely the type who cannot bear to be subordinate to others. When the opportune moment arrives, he will surely commit regicide and treason. Bone aspect. A glib tongue. This person can twist black into white. Skilled at calling a deer a horse. Two-faced. This person can quickly adjust to different personalities and appearances when facing different people and matters. Heart aspect. This person's face reveals murderous intent. He seems to want to harm me. The facial aspect represented this person's character traits and potential future actions. The bone aspect. It seemed, by looking at a person's skeletal form, one could discern their main abilities and innate talents. And the heart aspect, as Nguyen Ho understood it, could reveal whether a person harbored enmity, neutrality, or friendliness towards him. It had to be said. This art of person reading was truly miraculous. But it seemed for now, the first two, indicating the future, were not necessarily usable yet. As for the last one, the heart aspect, it was the most useful at present. A single glance could reveal whether the person before him was an enemy or a friend. A person with hawk eyes and a wolfish look didn't necessarily mean they would betray immediately. Nor did it mean they were unusable. But someone who revealed murderous intent was certainly preparing or had already done something detrimental to him. Faced with everyone's accusations, the Prime Minister knelt on the ground, wailing and crying, "Your Majesty, 8,000 mistakes, 10,000 mistakes, it is all my fault. Ah, to think I failed to recognize the origins of that fiend, almost allowing Your Majesty to be harmed by him. As Prime Minister, I couldn't even." He put on an appearance of absolute loyalty, devoted to the people and the state. His recommendation of the fiend to Your Majesty was undeniable, and his intricate connections with the Vu Hitch of the Hell Dao sect were indeed true. He decisively chose to retreat in order to advance. Conversely, without direct evidence, what could these rumors do to him? The most important thing now was to appease the Son of Heaven. To prevent the Son of Heaven from actually summoning that pillar of state. Grand General Pei Yuanzhao, to the capital. After all, it had taken great effort, uniting various forces, to push him out of the western capital. Fortunately, Your Majesty is blessed by the heavens. This is heaven protecting our great Shang. Nguyen Ho no longer paid attention to the words that followed. They were like wind passing by his ears. Once he had seen through the man's true nature, his act only made one feel it was pretentious and unbearably artificial. Nguyen Ho merely looked at the ministers below, one by one, and also at those around him, looking at those near the Prime Minister. A dark, dense crowd. Their aspects were all alike. A dagger hidden behind a smile. Deer-headed and rat-eyed. The heart of a wolf and the ambition of a beast. Looking again, several eunuchs stood beside him. For one of them, it directly revealed facial aspect, a heart of vipers and scorpions. And recalling the pillar of state, Grand General, whom he had seen earlier, calming himself now, that seemed to be the rebellious bone at the nape of the neck. On the throne sat a tiger-wolf king. In the imperial court, hawk-wolf ministers, treacherous generals, viper-scorpion servants. My great Shang is indeed like the midday sun. Fierce generals like clouds, worthy talents flocking in, all are gathering here. Nguyen Ho silently watched the farcical scenes below, showing no reaction whatsoever until the very end. He did not summon Pei Yuanzhao to the capital, nor did he punish or appease the Prime Minister. It was just this demeanor that, conversely, left everyone completely unable to guess his thoughts. Finally, this court session ended in a bizarre atmosphere. The Prime Minister, tears streaming down his face, walked out of the imperial city. After being helped into his carriage, his expression instantly changed. Those eyes became like a hawk's, sharp as a shooting arrow. What is going on? Why did that ghost master act without my orders? The servant standing outside dared not speak. He also didn't know the situation. He could only say, I have already sent someone to inquire. The Prime Minister nodded slightly. But then he continued, furthermore, although the Son of Heaven said nothing today, he keenly sensed something. Quote, today, His Majesty seemed somewhat off. After the court session ended, Nguyen Ho changed into plain clothes and proceeded to the Hall of Purple Divinity. Walking through the corridor, he immediately saw the guards on both sides kneeling down, their armor clanking. Clang, clang. Nguyen Ho looked over. One of them was Yuchi Chongwu, who had just been promoted to Palace Attendant General of the Inner Court. He was now in charge of guarding the exterior of the Sleeping Palace and the Hall of Purple Divinity. Taking the opportunity, Nguyen Ho also carefully examined Yuchi Chongwu's aspect. Facial aspect. Large ears with thick earlobes. Vast aspirations, a man of loyalty, righteousness, and benevolence. Bone aspect. Aspect of the silver spear. Skilled with a silver spear. Capable of earning a marquisate with it. Heart aspect. This man's loyalty to you is commendable. Especially when you continuously praise him. His future and ambitions are tied to your hands. Nguyen Ho looked at Yuchi Chongwu. He had been pondering how to deal with that crowd of loyal and righteous officials in the court. And now, in an instant, he had a countermeasure. Yuchi Chongwu, your servant is present. In a few days, I intend to go outside the city to hunt. You go make the arrangements. Today, I want to inspect the archery skills of the Imperial Guard officers and soldiers at the archery grounds. Yes, Your Majesty. This art of person reading would allow him to quickly select from among the Imperial Guards those who were loyal to him, or rather, loyal to his current status and this body. It would enable him, in the shortest possible time, to grasp a controllable force. As long as he had soldiers and men under his command, he would naturally no longer be afraid. At that time, he wanted to let that crowd of loyal and righteous officials in the court know what a tiger wolf king truly was. Kak Ban Dang Nghe Trian Demon Emperor Tai Feel Good Cultivation Audio Channel Chapter Sao The Blazing Sun Hung High. On the training ground, dust flew as groups of Imperial Guardsmen shouted boisterously. Kill! Good! 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 Rapid fire arrows! All on target. On the marshal's platform, banners fluttered. Nguyen Ho, having changed into a military uniform, sat high above, watching the Imperial Guard brothers show off their martial arts one by one. In the arena, valiant warriors, drenched in sweat, exerted all their strength, wielding cloth-tipped long spears, letting out hoarse battle cries as they sparred. Some also wrestled on the yellow sand, displaying their martial prowess before him. One man, on horseback, continuously hit targets 200 paces away, causing all the officers and soldiers in the field to raise their spears and cheer thunderously. Afterward, this man dismounted before the marshal's platform, kowtowed to receive his reward, and expressed his gratitude. It was said to be an archery assessment, but it naturally evolved into a competition of various martial arts. Nguyen Ho didn't mind. The so-called martial arts assessment was merely a pretext. Even the hunt itself was just a pretext. His main purpose in coming here was to use his skill of judging people to see how many within these Imperial Guard barracks were truly capable. Besides the predetermined reward, Nguyen Ho even took off the worn purple brocade battle robe he was wearing and threw it to this man. Excellent rapid-fire archery. This is your reward. With such martial skill, why are you still just a Wu Lin Lang? Promote. Even if one usually criticized the state of affairs, feeling that those in high positions were all incompetent sycophants, blind, and often sighing over their own unutilized talents. If one day, the person from the Golden Throne Hall truly came before you, praised your abilities, rewarded you with money and silk, took off his own battle robe to place on you, and even promoted you, in an instant, that foolish ruler would become an enlightened one, and the blind one would transform into someone with profound insight. The military readiness of the Imperial Guard had been lax for many years. Although a few of those who had followed the late emperor into the western lands of the Northern Army still formed its foundation, most were now old and had retired, succeeded by their second-generation descendants. But with so many people, One could always find a few good seeds and some individuals with strong martial prowess. However, how to select these individuals, gather them, and utilize them effectively truly tested a general's foresight, requiring a long period of selection and bonding. As for Nguyen Ho, he could see through a person with a single glance. In just one morning, he could identify all the individuals within the Imperial Guard whom he could use, the forces he could mobilize. When it ended, Nguyen Ho waved his hand. Today, everyone who participated in the martial demonstration is rewarded with a bolt of silk. Bring out the wine. Eunuchs carried out 80 jars of tan phong wine and unsealed them. Arms laden with silk, noses filled with the aroma of wine. The mood, already excited by the martial display, was instantly stirred even further. Drink, thank you, Your Majesty. In an instant, the cheers of the Imperial Guard sons and brothers echoed to the heavens. However, after they had drunk 2 bowls, Nguyen Ho announced some news. What no one expected was that Nguyen Ho moved the hunt, originally planned for a few days later, to today. On the marshal's platform, Nguyen Ho, seemingly on a whim, spoke directly. Brothers, today you will follow me to the Phoenix Mountains South Garden. Skills that cannot be displayed on the training ground will be truly tested in the hunting grounds. If you truly have skill, there will be additional rewards. Amidst a clamor of drums, gongs, and cheers, the reputable and capable soldiers just selected by Nguyen Ho were incited by his words, eager to follow him out. Silk was money, and any game hunted could also be brought back. The animal meat could be eaten. Moreover, the hides, fur, sinews, bones, and horns were all of great use. Not to mention, the emperor had additional rewards. Normally, such good fortune was unheard of. There were 8,000 imperial guards in the capital. In the end, Nguyen Ho took Mo Nin Hai Tram men with him, the vast majority being those selected through the martial demonstration. It couldn't be said that he had completely skimmed off all the talent in the Imperial Guard, but it could be said that he had gathered those with real ability. Several Imperial Guard generals wanted to say something, but before they could say much, Nguyen Ho paid them no heed and directly led the men away. At noon, the road north of the city immediately became bustling. Clop clop, giddy up, clop clop. Groups of horsemen passed through the long streets and city gates, with a large contingent of infantry following closely behind, escorting the Son of Heaven's regalia out of the city. Banners followed one after another, fluttering in layers along the streets. In the Prime Minister's residence, the Prime Minister sat between 2 screens, his expression serious, discussing with several aides and officials Nguyen Ho's earlier mention of wanting to leave the capital for a hunt. But they did not yet know that the Son of Heaven had already departed. His Majesty is acting so unconventionally again. Prime Minister, you must stop His Majesty. Absolutely cannot let His Majesty leave the capital. Prime Minister, could the head eunuch in the palace perhaps devise a plan? His Majesty usually listens to his words. The Prime Minister felt uneasy, increasingly sensing that this unconventional action by the Emperor was completely beyond his control. At this moment, they still hadn't realized Nguyen Ho's intentions, but most courtiers disliked an emperor who was entirely beyond control, especially for a powerful minister. Don't be hasty. Tomorrow, I will go to the palace. Before he could finish speaking, someone hurriedly entered. He cupped his hands, then leaned in and whispered something into an aide's ear. Instantly, the aide exclaimed in astonishment. What? His Majesty took the Imperial Guard and left the capital directly? Hearing this, everyone's expression changed drastically. Some shot to their feet. Some leaned forward. Some immediately clenched their sleeves. What? Chase after him. Quickly bring His Majesty back. The Prime Minister himself stood up directly and strode quickly outside. I will go myself. However, the Son of Heaven seemed to have anticipated their plans. Before the court could react, Nguyen Ho had already led over 1,000 elite Imperial Guards out of the capital. The Prime Minister returned, panting with anger. At this point, the aides present all stared at each other in dismay. Then, someone finally spoke, breaking the silence. Why would the Son of Heaven suddenly want to leave the city for a hunt? And in such a hurry? Could it be that he already knew he wanted to? Instantly, the atmosphere became even more somber. The Western Garden hunting ground was located at Phoenix Mountain, west of the Western capital. Leaving the Western capital, Nguyen Ho suddenly felt like a bird freed from its cage, a dragon cavorting in the vast sea. During the march, Nguyen Ho carefully observed how the officers and soldiers, from top to bottom, arranged their formations, conducted reconnaissance to clear the path, and organized the march, how messengers relayed orders and patrolled, what the various signal flags meant, and how logistics and cleanup were arranged. The western outskirts, the Imperial Guard set up camp near an abandoned temple. Initially, Nguyen Ho thought the temple enshrined a mountain god, but upon entering and seeing the deity's statue, he realized it seemed to be a military general. While setting up camp, Nguyen Ho also specifically observed for a while how Yuchi Chongwu arranged the construction of the temporary encampment. The sky gradually darkened. Around midnight, when everyone was resting, Nguyen Ho seemed to hear some movement. More precisely, the fierce tiger within his body sensed something. It suddenly emerged from him and hovered around him. Nguyen Ho put on an outer garment, took his longsword, and with 2 or 3 men, got up and went into the main hall of the temple. The inner courtyard was covered with fallen leaves. The cawing of crows echoed from the trees, but no crows were visible. Following his senses, he wandered around the dilapidated temple and soon noticed a mural behind the deity's statue. What is this painting? The mural seemed to depict celestial beings, flying in groups across the sky, all of them female, making the mural appear peaceful and gentle. Nguyen Ho felt this painting was somewhat strange. It was said to be in the Central Plains style, yet something about it seemed off. It lacked some of the ethereal and classical brushwork of Central Plains portraiture, instead emphasizing the alluring, graceful figures of the women. Their attire also had a hint of Hu tribal influence. Quote, "That's not right. Why is something moving in that mural?" Nguyen Ho looked closely and finally discovered why the tiger had suddenly emerged from him. Something in the painting was disturbing it. Nguyen Ho focused his gaze and looked again carefully. He saw in a corner of the painting a ferocious demon, drawn in a distinctly different style, intruding onto the wall. That demon carried a bow and arrows on its back, wielded a blade, and with a menacing, murderous aura, chased after the group of celestial beings in the painting. At this point, he shifted his gaze to the painted celestial beings and discovered the expressions and postures of the celestial beings flying in the sky, and the painting had also changed. All of them showed looks of terror. And the demon in the painting seemed to realize someone outside was watching it. It immediately revealed bloodshot eyes and slashed towards Nguyen Ho. Without hesitation, Nguyen Ho directly swung his sword to meet it. Bang! Chapter Bay. Nguyen Ho swung his sword, slashing down. With the clang of metal, the demon in the painting was slashed into 2 pieces. But very quickly, the demon in the painting stirred, coalescing like smoke. It seemed, although Nguyen Ho's sword had struck him, it couldn't harm his essence. Nguyen Ho looked at the demon and saw that he was furious. He had merely glanced at Nguyen Ho, and Nguyen Ho had immediately struck him with the sword. Whether when he was alive or after death, he could not endure such rage. The demon in the mural seemed to be shouting curses, but Nguyen Ho could only see him, not hear what he was saying. He couldn't be bothered to listen either. Then he saw the demon even trying to escape the painting, wanting to avenge himself on Nguyen Ho for that sword strike. Seeing the demon slowly approaching, his form gradually growing larger. Bang! How could Nguyen Ho let him emerge? He delivered another sword strike. This time, it was a thrust. This strike once again pierced through and dispersed the demon, causing him to coalesce once more. Prevented from emerging, the demon became even more infuriated. The demon took the bow from his back, apparently preparing to draw it and shoot an arrow at Nguyen Ho outside the mural. However, when Nguyen Ho saw the demon trying to emerge, his form had grown much larger, and he realized this thing somewhat resembled the idol worshipped in the temple. His mind raced, and he immediately turned and slashed towards the nearby idol. This time, the demon was frantic, but it was too late. Nguyen Ho leapt onto the high platform and, with a few strikes, shattered the idol. The guards accompanying him didn't know what was happening and hurriedly followed. Still bewildered. Whoosh! Only then did the demon's arrow fly. Unfortunately, the arrow went limp as soon as it left the painting. Before it could even get close to Nguyen Ho, the tiger beside Nguyen Ho pounced on it. Thwack! The arrow was smacked down, turning into a puddle of an ink-like substance on the ground. Nguyen Ho turned his head and saw the terrified expression on the demon's face in the painting. The bow in his hand hanging limply, powerlessly. This idol seemed to be the demon's true form, the root of his existence in the mortal realm. And Nguyen Ho, by personally destroying this idol, also seemed to have triggered something in the tiger. Roar! The tiger let out an irrepressible roar and leapt directly into the painting. The tiger usually only hunted at night, and previously had to wait until the second day for dead things to coalesce into ghosts. This time, facing a ghost directly, the tiger devoured the demon right in front of Nguyen Ho. This time, Nguyen Ho saw the expressions of the group of deities in the mural become even more terrified. Growl! Growl! The tiger emerged from the painting, chewed for a long while, and finally spat out a round orb of light, which entered Nguyen Ho's mind through his pupils. Nguyen Ho immediately saw many images. There were images of practicing martial arts every morning, drawing a bow and nocking an arrow. There were images of facing enemies on the battlefield, a single arrow striking down a foe. The soul snatch had no name. These were all the opponent's lifetime memories related to archery. This archery seemed to be the demon's most proficient skill when he was alive. Refined by the tiger, and could be summarized as soul snatch, archery, 100 shots, 100 hits. Nguyen Ho looked at the mural, especially at the figures depicted flying in the sky. At this moment, the group of deities in the painting had returned to their original forms. Motionless. It was as if the recent changes had merely been Nguyen Ho's illusion. Nguyen Ho had no way to enter the painting, so he eventually gave up. He thought to himself that after returning, he would send men here to take this mural away. The autumn sun shone brightly. Clip-clop, clip-clop, on the yellow maple leaves in the mountain forest. The cold dew from the previous night still lingered. The hooves of the Imperial Guard's armored cavalry trampled the dry red and yellow leaves covering the ground, causing the dewdrops to fall as well. Beneath a tree branch, Nguyen Ho heard a chilling sound. This time, when he looked up, his sharp eyes immediately helped him lock onto the target. The ability of soul snatch, archery, 100 shots, 100 hits, had also enhanced his observational skills. Caw, 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 as if sensing Nguyen Ho's sharp gaze. The black crow shrewdly flew away. Yuchi Chongwu, holding the reins beside the imperial carriage, saw Nguyen Ho remove his gold-threaded dragon-embroidered wrist guard and immediately reached out to take it. Today, Nguyen Ho wore a pale yellow, wide-sleeved robe. His small steps made the gold-inlaid patterns on the robe shimmer under the morning sun. At his waist, he still wore the sword that had once cut down Vu Hitch and slain that demon. Begin the encirclement. A loud shout shattered the forest's tranquility. In an instant, the sound of horns echoed to the heavens, and the clatter of iron hooves thundered through the dry branches like rolling thunder. On both sides, 10 saw-toothed banners fluttered, and the ground itself seemed to tremble, causing foxes, rabbits, and deer to bolt in panic from the undergrowth. Ahead, one man eagerly rushed out and shot an arrow. But unfortunately, he missed. Another man close behind him followed, and a second arrow left the bowstring, piercing a fleeing gray fox. Seeing this, Nguyen Ho clapped and laughed heartily. Excellent, we've caught an enemy scout. Reward him. As soon as these words were spoken, those around him also burst into laughter. The auspicious start invigorated the soldiers participating in this hunt, making them even more eager to search for prey in the forest. Flushing them out and encircling them. In the imperial carriage, Nguyen Ho looked towards Yuchi Chongwu beside him and spoke. My bow. Yuchi Chongwu did not hesitate, directly kneeling on one knee and presenting the bow with both hands, along with the deerskin quiver from his waist. Nguyen Ho glanced at it. It was a 5-stone strength bow. So he tossed it back. He turned his head to one side, pointing at a guard. You. Although it was only one word, the guard understood Nguyen Ho's meaning. He immediately emulated Yuchi Chongwu, presenting his own bow and quiver. This was a 2-stone bow. Just right. Coincidentally, a Sika deer, startled by the sounds of the hunt, ran out, crossing an open patch in the forest, intending to leap into the bushes. Without thinking, Nguyen Ho directly drew his bow and nocked an arrow. Whoosh! The arrow tore through the air. The agile Sika deer leapt high. But before it could plunge into the dense thicket, it fell from mid-air. In an instant, cheers erupted across the hunting grounds. Brilliant! 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 A hit! Who was that? It's His Majesty. His Majesty made the shot. His Majesty's shot was amazing. Immediately, a cavalry officer spurred his horse to retrieve the deer, bringing it before Nguyen Ho. Dismounting and kneeling, 2 guards beside Nguyen Ho also came to help, holding up the Sika deer. Congratulations, Your Majesty. Yuchi Chongwu, looking at the Sika deer, was also astonished. The arrow had pierced straight through the deer's neck, killing it instantly with a single shot. Initially, when Nguyen Ho held the bow, there was still a slight sense of unfamiliarity. As he hit target after target, that sense of unfamiliarity gradually disappeared. It was as if the person who drew a bow and nocked an arrow every morning, even the one who achieved 100 hits out of 100 shots on the battlefield, was him. His Majesty hit another one. Truly skilled archery. I never expected His Majesty to possess such divine archery skills. In the army, archery could be said to be one of the most important skills. Everyone looked at Nguyen Ho, and for a moment, their gazes changed. If initially, Nguyen Ho had relied on his status and rewards to motivate these men, now he could be said to have conquered these soldiers with his archery skills. As dusk painted the hunting grounds red, the Imperial guards were inventorying the game, piled up like a small mountain. Under the twilight, everyone's face bore a smile, boasting of their heroic feats on the hunt today, then occasionally glancing towards the Son of Heaven in the distance. Night had completely fallen when suddenly a north wind blew, scattering fallen leaves. Nguyen Ho looked up and saw the distant silhouette of the mountains. Nguyen Ho frowned. He felt as if something else was watching him. Kak Ban Dang Nghe Trian Demon Emperor Thai Feel Good Cultivation Audio Channel Chapter Tam, Your Majesty. Are you looking for something? Go outside and keep watch. Yes. Late at night, Nguyen Ho once again stood before that mural. Nguyen Ho raised the candle, its light tracing across the vast mural as he carefully observed the deities depicted upon it. The flickering candlelight caused the faces of the celestial beings to shift between light and shadow. He counted. A total of 33 figures could be discerned in the painting. Their magnificent garments, in the style of the Hu people, featured sheer upper sections that revealed their skin. Their waists were cinched with long skirts, and they wore short-sleeved, multicolored, thin silk cloaks over their slender, tall figures. Yet, on their heads, their hair was styled in high buns, adorned with Taoist crowns. They looked like Taoist priestesses but were not. Resembled celestial beings yet were not quite so. During the day, were you looking at me? Just then, one of the figures in the mural moved. Nguyen Ho looked up and noticed one of the celestial maidens within it seemed to be staring intently at him. Her eyes blinked, and the mural transformed again. That celestial maiden extended a jade-like hand, as if beckoning him. Her flowing, cloud-like garments danced within the painting, seemingly wanting to entwine around Nguyen Ho's arm. Nguyen Ho, unafraid, reached out his hand in response to the invitation. As his fingers touched the mottled mural, suddenly, flakes of gold leaf from the ancient artwork rustled and fell. The scent of sandalwood, mingled with the ancient aroma of cinnabar, wafted towards his face. The string of pearls on the hand of the celestial maiden holding a lotus in the center of the mural suddenly glowed brightly, and the figure in the painting seemed to transform from illusion to reality. Then, the wall rippled like water, pulling Nguyen Ho inside. The sensation of weightlessness lasted for about 3 breaths. When he regained his footing, his shoes were treading on white jade tiles. Looking up and around, the air was steeped in cold mist, and 9 layered cinnabar curtains floated lazily in midair. At this moment, he was standing in the celestial palace depicted in the mural. Nguyen Ho listened intently and heard the distant strains of sublime fragrance music. Following the melodious music, more than 10 celestial maidens in flowing, colorful silk robes descended from jade pavilions. The leader wore a green phoenix hairpin, her skin as white as snow, draped in cloud-like garments. Ribbons of silk fluttered past Nguyen Ho's face, seemingly teasing his thoughts. To express our gratitude for your Majesty's previous act of saving us, we have specially come today to host a banquet in return. A refined voice drifted down from the clouds. Nguyen Ho turned his head and saw the celestial maiden from the mural, the one who had just led the others, sitting gracefully on a 12-tiered golden dais. The wadian on her forehead was blood red. Other celestial maidens surrounded her, bowing in reverence. At first glance, it was as if the scene from the mural had manifested in reality. Nguyen Ho looked up and asked her, "Who are you?" She replied, "I am Du Hong, temporarily residing here, and can be considered the mistress of this place." Nguyen Ho was invited by her to ascend the jade steps and enter a grand hall. Nguyen Ho looked up and saw a plaque above the grand hall inscribed with the 3 characters, "Flying Celestials Hall." "Your Majesty, please be seated." Nguyen Ho was invited to sit in the host seat, the most honored position in the grand hall. The celestial maiden Du Hong stepped aside to attend to him. It seemed that at this moment, he was the true master of this celestial palace. A glazed cup containing amber-colored celestial nectar floated before him. Nguyen Ho lifted the glazed cup to admire it. It was so transparent that the nectar within could be clearly seen. "Your Majesty, please drink up." Du Hong sat down beside Nguyen Ho, her slender fingers gently lifting another glazed cup. Her high bun loosened slightly as she bowed her head to drink, revealing her beautiful, jade-like neck. Her celestial robe, already sheer, struggled to conceal her voluptuous figure. Nguyen Ho glanced casually, then directed his gaze below the dais. The celestial maidens are all holding musical instruments. They must be well versed in music. "May I enjoy a piece?" The celestial maiden Du Hong smiled and nodded. "Your Majesty, please wait a moment." The celestial maiden gently waved her wide sleeve, and 49 pearl-like lamps lit up one by one. Young maidens in light blue, thin silk emerged from behind intricately carved railings, silver bells adorning their cascading hair jingling softly with each dance step as they entered the hall. Following the sound of a zither, the dance began. A young maiden near Nguyen Ho's left, holding a curved neck pippa upside down, abruptly stopped her dance and looked up at Nguyen Ho. Her delicate posture made one feel as if she were boneless. Her fingertips gently brushed across the 4 strings. As she plucked them, a pure fragrance of bergamot orange wafted to the high host seat. Then she smiled charmingly and turned around. Meanwhile, the celestial maiden in the center played a 23-stringed, phoenix-headed Kongho harp. As her fingernails plucked the strings, she continued to dance, her slender thighs visible beneath her flowing, pomegranate red skirt. Her skirt and robes swirled with each rapid movement, like a karmic fire-red lotus. What was most dazzling was the woman on the right playing the fangshong. Her left hand held an ebony mallet, striking 16 iron slabs arranged in a row. The sound produced condensed into white plum blossoms. Those were the musicians. Besides them, there were also dancers. 3 long-haired dancers, their hair swirling to the rhythm of the he-drum, caressed the bare skin of their waists. Cascading locks adorned with silver bells actually concealed tiny holes that produced the 5 tones when the wind passed through. It naturally formed a melody in the style of Suo Mo Jae. Nguyen Ho had never seen nor heard such a way of making music. The golden rings on their toes were not mere ornaments but symbols capable of producing 9 different sounds. This was not only the ultimate auditory indulgence but also the ultimate visual feast. If initially Nguyen Ho had only found them beautiful, At this moment, he felt their beauty had sublimated, becoming transcendent and ethereal. Amidst this, Nguyen Ho raised his cup again. He opened his mouth to ask, "Where do you deities come from? You look like followers of Taoism, yet also somewhat like those of Buddhism. But upon closer inspection, you seem to be from the western regions." Nguyen Ho looked at the celestial maiden Ju Hong, silently guessing her origins and background. Quote, "Are you gods, Buddhas, or immortals?" Ju Hong returned the courtesy and said to Nguyen Ho, "Your Majesty has sharp eyes. I originally came from the west, initially a deity of a foreign land. After drifting to the east, my old name has long been forgotten. Later, the Western Liang Women's Kingdom worshipped us. After more than 100 years, we also became deities of the western regions. Then, as the fortunes of the Western Liang Women's Kingdom declined, the tribes worshipping the Queen Mother of the West occupied the western regions, and we became female immortals under her. Buddhism spread eastward, and most of the western regions converted to Buddhism. We then transformed into celestial maidens of Buddhism. Several hundred years ago, the Central Plains underwent turmoil. A large number of people from the Central Plains came to the western regions, bringing many Central Plains classics, among them no shortage of Taoist disciples. Gradually, our appearance and attire began to resemble those of the Central Plains people, and even our speech and demeanor changed accordingly. Seas turned into mulberry fields. Dynasties change, and gradually, no one in the western regions worshipped us anymore. So, we drifted to this place. Speaking to this point, the celestial maiden Ju Hong couldn't help but feel a sense of sorrow. Now we have become wandering spirits, lonely ghosts. Nguyen Ho now understood why they, clearly foreign deities, had such an appearance. No, or rather, with the changes of the times, they were no longer foreign deities but had been assimilated, becoming part of the Central Plains. He also understood better why they appeared in this area west of the city. Nguyen Ho found it marvelous. Times change, people on Earth change, dynasties are constantly replaced, and at the same time, the gods, Buddhas, immortals, and saints on this land are also changing. Do deities also move with the land, change with time, and thus constantly transform? The celestial maiden Ju Hong nodded gently, letting out a sigh. Deities are inherently created by the hearts of people. How can they not change? Having said that, Ju Hong moved closer and once again offered wine to Nguyen Ho. Quote, "Yesterday, that malevolent demon finally found the entrance to this sublime musical paradise of mine. If not for your Majesty's assistance in eliminating it, I fear this sublime musical paradise of mine would have been seized by that demon." Nguyen Ho suddenly felt the concept of deity crumble within him. These deities were indeed fragile. Once they lost worship, lost their roots, even a fierce demon could bully them. Drinking cup after cup of the celestial nectar in this sublime musical paradise, Nguyen Ho began to feel pleasantly intoxicated. He swayed slightly, his upright posture gradually leaning against the jade table, his hand supporting his cheek. "Your Majesty, please watch." At this moment, to thank him, the celestial maiden Ju Hong personally came forward to dance, presenting the true, sublime fragrance celestial music, dance. The celestial maiden Ju Hong's Konghou harp sounded notes that stirred the soul, captivating the spirit. The dragon-carved pillars flanking the jade dais suddenly transformed into a forest of pink and white peach blossoms. Sitting in the hall, Nguyen Ho felt the surrounding scenery constantly changing. For a moment, he felt he was strolling through the peach blossom forest. The next moment, he saw a beauty dancing with a sword under the moon. Looking up, he was soaring among the clouds. His eyes closed slightly as he calmly listened to that enchanting, sublime fragrance, melody. When he opened his eyes again, that exquisitely beautiful celestial maiden, carrying countless flower petals, descended before his jade table. Ju Hong's hand traced Nguyen Ho's neck, slowly caressing his face. Her cloud-like silk robe fell upon him like a gentle spring rain and breeze. "If your Majesty is willing to stay, become the master of this sublime musical paradise and enjoy endless pleasure." Chapter Chen Nguyen Ho sat perfectly still, allowing the celestial maiden Ju Hong to act as she pleased. He seemed completely unfazed, or perhaps he was truly intoxicated. Become the master of this place? What are the benefits? The celestial maiden Ju Hong drew closer, her face almost touching his. Her countenance was as beautiful as a painting, without a single flaw. She asked Nguyen Ho, quote, "Am I beautiful?" Nguyen Ho said, to describe the celestial maiden's beauty with terms like beauty that topples cities and nations or national beauty. Heavenly fragrance would still, I fear, not be enough, the celestial maiden Ju Hong said, but to preserve such a visage, one can only stay here, where time stands still, allowing for eternal youth. Nguyen Ho nodded slightly. What else? The celestial maiden Ju Hong clapped her hands. Clap, clap. Several beauties, clad in thin gauze and carrying agate wine gourds, emerged from a shower of blossoms. Their soft, fragrant bodies pressed close to his arm. Here, the beauties are always fresh. Whatever type your majesty desires, you shall have. The celestial maiden Ju Hong then pointed towards the crimson pavilions and jade lofts, her sleeve brushing over the jade table, conjuring all sorts of fine wines and ambrosia. Quote, "This place is free from the troubles of the mortal world, yet it possesses a richness far surpassing it. Even though your majesty is the son of heaven in the mortal realm, you too have myriad troubles from which you cannot escape. Even with supreme wealth, it will not last." Nguyen Ho, is this place truly without troubles? How can it last? If that were so, why would the celestial maiden be distressed about the fiend from the other day? The celestial maiden Ju Hong, your majesty is different. Your majesty possesses the destiny of a son of heaven, bearing the fortune of a nation. You will surely endure and fear no ghosts or gods. Nguyen Ho offered no opinion, nor did he expose the other's thoughts. In Nguyen Ho's view, her hosting this banquet was a pretense. The real purpose was to test him. Of course, if he truly agreed to stay, she probably wouldn't refuse, but it was highly likely he would also turn into one of these immortals. Such divinity he did not desire. He had seen through their essence. These ancient deities were influenced by the changes in the mortal world, existing as dependents of it. One day, when they declined, even an unknown general from some dynasty who had turned into a fiend could threaten them. Calculated this way, the strength of the mortal world was true strength. Everything here was more like flowers in a mirror. The moon in water, dependent on the mortal realm. However, Nguyen Ho was in no hurry. Next, Nguyen Ho remained nestled among the beauties, listening to Ju Hong's celestial music, watching the celestial beings dance. At a glance, it seemed he was completely immersed in this peach blossom village. Feeling it was getting late, Nguyen Ho suddenly put down the glazed cup, slowly rising from upon the woman's soft, fair legs. "It is getting late. I must return. Thank you for the immortal fairy's invitation. I have indeed broadened my horizons and witnessed the grandeur of an immortal's residence." Seeing Nguyen Ho's demeanor, the celestial maiden Ju Hong sighed and said, "Your majesty is indeed a person of great ambition, not comparable to ordinary mortals. A pity. Your majesty bears the mandate of heaven. There are more important matters to attend to in the mortal world. Otherwise, I would definitely wish to keep your majesty here a while longer." The two fair arms entwined around his neck slowly loosened. The sound of the konghou in the palace ceased. Nguyen Ho looked around. The figure of the celestial maiden Ju Hong gradually became transparent amidst the mist. Just as she was about to vanish, she placed a sachet filled with xingwu grass into Nguyen Ho's chest. "The road back passes through Jiu Yuan City. Be careful of the person wielding a bronze saber with a kui dragon pattern. Also, the one who spied on your majesty yesterday was not either as an evil presence in Fonghoang Mountain. Your majesty must also be careful." Before her words finished, the entire hidden realm shattered like a broken glazed lantern. Nguyen Ho felt his mind reel once more, and a strong sensation of weightlessness washed over him. After 3 breaths, Nguyen Ho found himself still standing before the mural. Only the candles in his hands had burned out. and the sky behind him was slowly turning from dim to a silvery white. Nguyen Ho was still thinking that everything last night must have been an illusion. But when he smelled his clothes, his entire body was fragrant. The scent of cosmetics from that wondrous musical land still clung to him. His collar even bore the damp marks of fine wine and ambrosia. Reaching into his chest, he pulled out the sachet of Xingwu grass that the celestial maiden Du Hong had just given him. Illusory yet not illusory, real yet not real. This immortal's residence is truly somewhat mystical, making it hard to comprehend. Nguyen Ho carefully examined the sachet for a while, unsure of its purpose. However, since the celestial maiden Du Hong had given him this item, there was definitely some profound meaning to it. He put away the Xingwu grass sachet and then walked out. At the same time, he recalled the words the celestial maiden Du Hong had just spoken to him. The road back passes through Jiu Yuan City. Be careful of the person wielding a bronze saber with a Kui dragon pattern. There is an evil presence in Phong Hoang Mountain. Your Majesty must also be careful. This banquet had yielded a great harvest, an important warning and a piece of information related to an evil demon. The meaning of the first part was very clear. On the way back, someone or a group of people was preparing to assassinate him. And this person wielded a bronze saber with a Kui dragon pattern. Someone wants to harm me. Who could it be? Combining the existing information, Nguyen Ho could temporarily think of only three possibilities. The Grand Pillar General Pei Yuanshao, the Chancellor in Zijing City, and another one, the group of shamanistic sorcerers from the Hell Path. However, knowing in advance that someone wanted to make a move against him made it easier to handle. Comparatively, Nguyen Ho felt that the second piece of news was currently more noteworthy. More urgent. A demon? Nguyen Ho didn't know what he himself was. A mountain lord, or a celestial demon from the outer realms. And what, in this world, was a demon? But this was not important. What was important was, if he killed that tiger demon, could he eat its flesh? And could he retrieve his trans-soul essence? By now, Nguyen Ho had also walked out of the shrine. Outside, a dense crowd of people was waiting for him, kneeling in unison. The Son of Heaven's hunt was not yet over. The mountain was covered in pine trees. But because it was the transition of seasons, some trees were red, some green, their colors unevenly shaded. At a glance, it gave people an illusion of myriad purples and reds. Your Majesty, we've found it. Following yesterday's census, Nguyen Ho led everyone over the mountains in search. Nguyen Ho himself found nothing. But the scouts in the army had made a discovery, indeed. Everyone has their own expertise. Nguyen Ho found it so quickly? Scout. Just on the mountainside behind. Your subjects discovered a series of strange hoof prints. After Nguyen Ho went to inspect, these seemed to be the hooves of a donkey. Donkey hoof prints are usually narrower and longer than horse hoof prints. They appeared oval, quite pointed at the front, with rather parallel sides. The unusual point was that this donkey hooves were as large as a human hand. The first impression it gave was, how massive must this donkey be? No wonder this scout immediately reported it after discovering the hoof prints. Yuchi Chongwu carefully examined them for a while. Strange. Nguyen Ho looked towards him. How is it strange? Yuchi Chongwu, who had been looking at the hoof prints on the ground, turned and cupped his hands to report. These hoof prints are not in groups of 4, but in groups of 2, which is even stranger. Nguyen Ho. Perhaps this donkey sometimes stands upright. Nguyen Ho ordered an investigation of the villages and farms near the southern foot of the Phong Hoang mountain range. If such an evil demon had been staying here for a long time, the locals would surely have some rumors. Very quickly, a person was brought before Nguyen Ho. The old farmer. It is said there is a tomb behind the mountain. And that evil demon lives in the tomb behind the mountain. It comes out to snatch people every night. Nguyen Ho. How does it snatch people? And who does it snatch? The old farmer. All women. It's said that a few donkey brays are heard outside. And the woman, as if her soul has been called, runs out on her own to follow it. Nguyen Ho. Soul calling? As these words were spoken, the surrounding guards exchanged glances. Some showed looks of fear. It truly is a demonic creature. An evil demon? What does that donkey demon snatch women for? Humans naturally fear the unknown, especially the terrifying rumors related to evil demons that have circulated among the common folk since ancient times. Yuchi Chongwu turned, his gaze sweeping over the present guards. With over 1,000 of my imperial guards here, what evil demon would dare show its head? This donkey demon dares to cause trouble in this Fong Hoang mountain, today. We must butcher it, pull out its tendons and flay its skin. Nguyen Ho nodded slightly and said with a smile, "Let's go. Tonight we'll have roasted donkey meat buns." In an instant, the present generals and soldiers burst into laughter. Being of the same demonic ilk, Nguyen Ho felt no sympathy whatsoever for this donkey demon. To describe it in one sentence, it would probably be, what kind of being is it to even presume to be called a demon? You have just finished listening to episode Mo of the audiobook, Demon Emperor, at Feel Good Cultivation audio channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe to get the latest updates. Thank you so much.